Michael Schundelman called me Monday. And he said, I have a heads up and I'm always scared. But I'm going to let him and the superintendent make an announcement about what we're celebrating today.
So Michael Schundelman, I'm a member of the school committee, and what I called Pat to give her a heads up about on Monday night was that we were anticipating, and it did happen, that on Tuesday morning, Arnie Duncan, the Commissioner of Education for the federal government, announced that Winchester High School was a Blue Ribbon Award-winning high school for 2013. It's one of only 2 schools in Massachusetts so recognized for exemplary performance. The other school being a middle school. So it's a great achievement. I think we owe this thanks to the students primarily, all of the staff and faculty, the administration who are part of it, and in fact, all of the parents and residents of town who support.
And of course, the school committee.
I'm not sure about that, but I'll take it.
And the taxpayers of Winchester, we cannot leave them out.
So to our schools.
Senator Clark is not here tonight, but she was kind enough to co-sponsor this with us. And her 2 of her staff members are here. And if you'd like to talk to them afterward, Mark and Natalie are here. And as you'll notice, we're all wearing Winchester colors. I think this is very important for you all to notice. And what I'm hoping is that there'll be a lot less talking from here and a lot more talking from you all, but we wanted to get started with a report which looked at the last 20 years, because in 1993, when I was a member, I was newly in the legislature, we passed the Education Reform Act, which set in motion a whole bunch of things, including a lot more money, which was maintained over many, many years, and charter schools, and a new testing regimen, which rolled out over several years and didn't take effect for a while. It didn't start being a graduation requirement for a while. So they're going to talk a little bit about that. Then I want to hear from you all about what you're thinking. Your experiences are, I know that there are teachers here, I know there are parents here. I don't see any students here, and we have the superintendent. So I've asked them to make that presentation and then conversation, and then we're going to learn a bit about PARC, which everybody's going to learn about PARC, and it's changing as we speak. When the rollout will be. So first of all, how many people here are currently teaching or have taught? And how many people are parents, or you're always a parent? How many people are parents? Okay. And I did want to also thank Eric Guttenberger for sponsoring this through the Winchester Education Association, because it's very important to me to hear what it's like in the classroom. So the 2 people who are going to present tonight, one is somebody I know kind of well, is my husband, Alan Jehlen, who retired as a writer for NEA last year. But before that, he was a long time ago, he was an education reporter for many years for the Quincy Patriot Ledger and covered the Board of Education. And Lou Kruger is a professor of educational psychology at Northeastern University, and they're going to present their report. First, they're going to talk about what are we talking about first? We'll find out.
We're going to present the report briefly.
Oh, that's right. He's going to do the whole report about.
He's going to do half the report. I'm going to do the other half.
Okay, thank you.
We're not going to do the whole report. We're going to give plenty of time for discussion. We want this to be interactive. We know it's in the evening. We want to capture your attention, engage you. So I hope you find this informative as well as thought-provoking, and we could have a good discussion. Can we dim the lights just a little bit so we can see? I think it might make it easier to see the slides and help me. I could always put my glasses on. but my optometrist keeps reminding how vain I am. I don't like to wear them unless I have. Oh, so that's good. Yeah. Okay, I will do that. Okay. Okay. Thanks. So 20 years after education reform, this is the cover from a publication by Citizens for Public Schools that both Alan and I contributed to. We're both members on the board of this organization. And this just recently, it just came out, right? June, yeah.
Last June, because June was the 20th anniversary of that Education Reform Act of 1993, which created the MCAS graduation requirement and also created charter schools and also gave an enormous amount of new state money to schools. That was the 3 big points.
Yep.
Which,
No, that was good. No, that's good. So so you can keep going. Keep going.
Okay.
So standards, test, and school choice. It also, so it took us from mediocrity to the top. That's the conventional wisdom. And the reality is Massachusetts does very well on standardized tests. It's number 1 on the nation's report card. NAEP, also, National Educational Progress, in 4th and 8th grade math and reading, and that's been true for several years now. And it's near the top on an international assessment, the TIMSS. And I don't remember what TIMSS stands for, but is it technology and...
The end is...
Anyway. Okay, we'll keep moving. It's an international assessment.
International Math and Science Study, I think.
Yeah, and in Massachusetts compared to other countries that are acknowledged for their good educational system, high performance, and Massachusetts is right up there with them. And we also have a very high SAT participation. We're ranked near the top on that. So in terms of standardized tests, objective measures, Massachusetts is doing very well. But, as this slide indicates, we were also doing well before 1993. No state was significantly ahead of us in 4th or 8th grade reading. We might not have been at the very top, but we were near the top in these standardized tests before ed reform. And we should be. In fact, it would be newsworthy if we were not near the top. Why? Because in terms of family income and education, and if you look at the percent of Massachusetts parents who have at least a college degree, we're ranked right near the top in the nation. So we have a very highly educated populace here in Massachusetts, and that has a big impact on educational achievement. So we went from a more comprehensive assessment that involved multiple measures, and this was part of education reform, could be referred to as bubble sheets. Students taking standardized assessments in the form of the MCAS. And the need for having some kind of measure that we can compare to other states was embedded right in the ed reform language. But we still have achievement gaps. One of the purposes of ed reform was not just to raise the academic achievement of everyone, but close the achievement gap between socioeconomic groups, between black and white students, and on the NAEP, our gaps between white and Hispanic students are among the largest in the United States. Massachusetts is 31st of 49 states in the gap between black and white student graduation rates, so we're not doing well in that. and Massachusetts is in the bottom tier of states in progress towards closing the gaps for Black, Hispanic, and low-income students. So the good news on the one hand is we have the highest achievement scores in the nation on standardized instruments. The bad news, if you will, on the other hand, is we have a long way to go in terms of closing these very important gaps. And we were going to eliminate, and this is a quote from the former Secretary of Education, Paul Revelle. He said we were going to eliminate the correlation between zip codes and educational achievement and attainment. I'm sorry to say that 2 decades later, it's clear that we failed. These are big problems. These are big problems, but the fact of the matter is ed reform has not succeeded, at least on those fronts. So this is the rest of the story, if you will. Yep?
This is about narrowing the curriculum.
Oh, okay, right.
Some
right.
of the slides don't have.
Right. So Alan, you can feel free to add the things I forget. But Alan brings up a very good point. You implement a high-stakes exam like the MCAS, and then it's supposed to have these intended effects in terms of academic achievement, preparing students better for a global workforce. We know how competitive the work environment is and how difficult it is to get a good job now, so we need to prepare students for that. So those are the intended aims of ed reform, including having a high-stakes test. But then there are unintended consequences of high-stakes testing. And one of the unintended consequences is there's a tendency sometimes to teach to the test. That you know certain kinds of questions, certain kinds of skills are going to be included on the test. Everybody's watching those test scores. Administrators who are responsible for how the district's doing, teachers in their classrooms who feel responsible for how their students doing. Everyone wants to do well. So obviously there's a tendency to narrow one's focus on those specific skills that are on the test. And that sometimes creates other problems. And this is an achievement gap, actually a graduation gap that is problematic because of the MCAS. Because if we compare students in special education and general education, you could see in 2003, there's about equal numbers of students in special education and general education who by their senior year in high school have not passed the MCAS. So these are students, these are individuals who are not eligible to graduate with their cohort group because they haven't passed the MCAS. So in 2003, there was about equal numbers in special and general education. But you could see what happened over time. Over time in general, we have more students that are passing the MCAS. But one of the things that's happened is there's a growing gap between the number that are passing in general education and special education. So that blue line, that's okay. The blue line at the top, that has even gone up slightly, but pretty much stayed the same. The number of students in their high school year in special education who haven't passed the MCAS. So that's been relatively stable. But you can see the students in general education have continually done better. So not only do we have a black-white student achievement gap, but we also have a gap on the MCAS between students with disabilities and students in general education. I already went over it. So in the spring of 2003, the first year of high-stakes testing in Massachusetts, 52% of the seniors who had not passed the MCAS were in special education. A decade later, we're talking about 3/4 of the high school seniors who aren't passing the MCAS, they're in special education. And although Massachusetts has an alternate portfolio assessment for students in special education, so there's another type of assessment. If students are determined that they have such profound disabilities that it's not appropriate for them to take the traditional paper and pencil exam, there's an alternate exam, which we would all agree is a fair thing to do, a just thing to do. Because we don't want to disadvantage individuals because they have disabilities and can't take the regular exam, right? So the idea is we'll test them on the same competencies, but with an alternate exam. But the problem with this alternate exam is less than 1% of the students with disabilities who take it pass it. So it's a dead end. It's virtually a dead end. So Massachusetts has this alternate assessment, but very few students pass it at the high school level that's needed to get their diploma. And this just illustrates that. So this is high school students passing the alternate assessment. So these are students with disabilities. And this is data from 2012. English, math, science subjects. So you can see, for example, in English, you have over 1,000 high school students in 2012 taking the ALT assessment. These aren't mistakes, this data. And there's one student in the entire state that passed it out of 1,000. How in good conscience do we have an alternate assessment in the 21st century for individuals with disabilities and have data like this, which so few people? This is heartbreaking for both the student and the parents, because if you don't get a high school diploma, what avenues do you have a decent future? And you could see not much better, slightly better data for the alternate exam in math and science. So what should we do in terms of closing the diploma gap between students in special and general education? Well, one thing we can do, and there's been legislation that's proposed about this, to broaden the MCAS appeals process for students in special education. Another thing we can do is implement safeguards to ensure all students and their parents are informed about the appeals process. When Senator Jehlen and Alan and I were riding in the car here, I was mentioning an email I got, heartbreaking email, last week from a parent whose daughter in special education, high school senior, still hasn't passed the MCAS. The mom doesn't know what to do. She's writing me because she knows this. I'm aware of the data. I've written about these issues. She's looking for help. And much to my surprise, she didn't know anything about the appeals process. And my hunch, I don't know all the details, is her daughter might be eligible and might be able to get a diploma through the appeals process. But for whatever reason, was not aware of that potential route for her daughter. So it would be really a big step forward if we at least informed everyone of these alternate routes to get to the diploma. And it's also important to adopt a multiple assessments approach to determining the academic proficiency of students in special education. No one measure captures everything what someone knows in a particular subject area. You get a slice, a small part of the picture. And this is especially true with students in special education who may not learn like the rest of us and be able to express what they've learned like the rest of us. So then it becomes very important that you don't rely on any single measure. All measures, no matter how reliable or valid they are flawed. They have weaknesses. They have things they don't assess for certain individuals. And in my opinion, in good conscience, the least we could do for students in special education is take a multiple assessments approach. Many other states that have high-stakes exams, like Massachusetts, does that. Massachusetts doesn't. Other states also allow the special education students' IEP team to determine what assessments are most appropriate for a particular student. This isn't watering down standards. There is no one in a better position than the IEP team to determine what assessments are most appropriate to measure what a special education student needs. They're the professionals, they're the experts, they know that student. So they should be empowered like professionals, much like we empower physicians to make these kinds of judgments and what kind of assessments if you have a medical condition. So this is something that's not happening in Massachusetts, but is happening in other states, and these are prime reasons why Massachusetts has this achievement gap, not the achievement gap, excuse me, this graduation gap now between students in special education and general education. Okay, so that concludes my part, and I'll take over the slides.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about charter schools, but before I start, let me find out whether, I don't really know whether this is an issue in Winchester or not. Are there a lot of Winchester kids going to charter schools? No. Not. So in general, it's in poorer communities that have large numbers of kids. So in that case, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. I'll just say briefly that probably most people read newspapers, right? And the impression that you may get from newspapers is that it doesn't matter how poor a kid is, what that kid's family circumstances are. If you put that kid in a charter school with hardworking teachers who really care about that kid, the kid can thrive, right? And we don't have to do anything else about poverty. That's enough, because then that kid will thrive and go to college and become rich, right? Which would be very nice, because that would really be a cheap and easy way out of poverty. Unfortunately, like most cheap and easy ways, they don't actually work that well. So what we did in the report, and anybody who's interested, I think, can go look at it, and we'll have links to it, is we looked at studies of charter schools, mostly studies by people who like charter schools and, in fact, are funded by foundations that like charter schools, and looked at what they said. So what you find out is that actually in elementary school and in high school, the charter school kids do not do better. You find out that, that's what this graph shows. You find out that the charter schools, well, this is not from a study, but just from state data, charter schools suspend enormous numbers of kids. Some of these schools are suspending like a quarter or even more of their students. So not that the number, there are some students who are suspended many times, but that's not what we're talking about. If you have 100 kids at the school, 25 of them have been suspended at some point at least once during the year. So how does that happen? So it happens because in some of these schools, not all, the schools that are called no excuses charters, I don't know how many people have heard of them. So the no excuses is not only for the teachers, it's also for the kid. So it doesn't matter whether your dad is in jail, you are going to do the work. And if you don't follow the rules exactly right, you get a demerit. And a certain number of demerits leads to a suspension. So we've got here, this is one of the schools that suspends a lot of kids. These are rules for, I believe, K1 or K2, right? Kindergarten, first and second grade. If the kid is wearing a polo shirt, which he's supposed to wear, but without the insignia, he gets sent to the dean's office and receives a demerit, and his parents are called. If a kid is wearing the wrong color socks, right? So this is like the military total. So, of course, a lot of these kids don't stay. So the kids who do stay are the kids who are willing to follow rules exactly, right? And that might be the reason for the next slide, which shows This is from the Credo study that, I don't know how much you follow this stuff, but this is like the #1 study that is cited by charter school proponents as proof that charter schools can solve all problems. In the first year, the charter school kids do not do better, right? They're up a little bit in math, down a little bit in reading compared to district schools. It's only in the second, third, and fourth year. So we wrote to them and we said, gee, do you have an explanation for this? What is going on here? And the answer that we got from a very honest, I think, wonderful researcher was, we quoted from it, but I'm not going to worry about the exact words. Essentially, he said, well, there's two things going on. There's the school, there's a wonderful school, and there's also the kinds of kids who stay there. If you stay more than one school, more than 1 year, you're a special kind of kid, right? You are a kid who's going to benefit from a charter school. And I would say, I think that there are some kids who get enormous help from charter schools, right? But there are also a lot of kids who get no help from charter schools that get booted out. So I think charter schools are not the silver bullet. At least, charter schools have different purposes. The one that gets the most publicity is the idea that you can take a kid out of poverty, accomplish something that has never been done in the rest of the civilized world, right? Which is take kids who are at the bottom of society and get them just as good an education as kids at the top of society. If charter schools could do that, that would really be an earth-shaking development. Unfortunately, it's not so. There are kids who make it from the bottom to the top, but that is not a solution for the average kid. What else do we have here? Oh, I think I'm not going to go into that. That has to do with they have trouble in college, but that's okay. So, so I think the conclusions of this report are, in a way, it's like the message of the charter school supporters, which is they say to their kids, there is no shortcut to an education. You've got to work hard. And we are saying to the sort of political establishment, there is no shortcut to eliminating poverty. There's no easy ways to do it. You have to do things that are really pretty expensive, right? And we listed some of those things. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on them. But so one of them is more money. One of them is much more complex and could even be more expensive forms of assessment if you're going to really know what's going on in a school. I don't think there's anybody who thinks that a test score is what they really want out of the school, right? It's only one slice. You ask parents, there are surveys that'll ask parents, what do you want out of education? And they say things about character, about learning how to deal with reverses, about all kinds of becoming a competent adult, right? Being able to analyze literature is really only kind of a small part. Calculus is really not way up there. So, I think in communities like Winchester, the main impact of this law was probably the effect of the testing, because everybody has to take the test, even if all the students are doing well and graduating and all of that, right? So then, because the real estate agents are looking at the test scores, right? I mean, I have a friend who lives in Brookline, where there was a school that was at the top, and then the next year they were number 2 in the state. Oh, this was a disaster. So the effect of that is that even these, great teachers in great circumstances with all the parent support, they could do wonderful things with those kids. They're spending time teaching them test-taking skills that have zero to do with anything that's going to happen to them later. And there was this amazing statement from Commissioner Chester a couple of days ago, and this was actually about Park, about the new set of tests. So now that they're going to have a new set of tests, all of a sudden the people who are trying to say, this is really worth doing. I mean, I understand the psychology of this. So you want to say, well, this is better than before. So you sort of look down on what there was before. He said in the Globe, and then he repeated it at a state board meeting, MCAS was never designed as an indicator of college or career readiness. So what are we killing ourselves over MCAS scores if it's not designed as an indicator of anything that means anything in a kid's life? career? What is it an indicator of? Right? That was like amazing.
So everyone here is aware that there's, Massachusetts has made a commitment to replace the MCAS with another, okay, and that's the part.
Not a final decision, a decision on the transition plan, but they continue, they repeat it. We're only going to do this if it's as good or better, to which one of the board members said, well, if it's as good, why would we want to change? But at any rate, they, at least, on the other hand, Mitchell Chester is the head of the governing board of Park, so he certainly has a personal commitment to it. So there was actually a lot of new information at this meeting, which they should be sending you if they haven't already. Are you field testing in Winchester?
We have been invited to field test.
Yeah, the memos that I saw did not look like invite. It looked more like
At this
direct
point-
and you can
at
appeal.
At this point, my stance is that we've been invited
I
to
see.
field test.
Good for you.
You mentioned the common, these are excellent points. You mentioned the Common Core standards. One of the reasons we're going to have probably a new test is because we're having a new curriculum that is now being rolled out at a national level. So at one time, it was 20 years ago, it was controlled by each town, what the student, if you were a parent, you're a teacher, want to have input into the curriculum, you could have input into it. And then, that reform 20 years ago went to the state level. Now it's going to the national level. So any impact, any ideas you may have about curriculum are increasingly beyond your control, what you're going to deliver. And there's good and bad things about having a national curriculum. But the test is coming because you need the test. You can't have a test that's aligned on a curriculum that doesn't exist anymore because there's a new curriculum. You have to have a new test for that. So that's part of the challenge.
Okay, so a little bit of information about the park. Do you want to push them? So these are the states that used to be in park as of last spring. They've actually lost, there used to be more than that. As of last spring, they had this. Florida looks like they're pulling out as of 2 days ago. And Indiana pulled out a while back. So there has been actually quite a bit of pushback in the members. So everybody understand this is a set of tests that's being developed by a whole group of states. There's another whole group of states that's developing a different test that's different in some ways. It's mostly the same, but there are some differences. And both of them are funded by the Department of Education. Right? And the idea was to come up with tests that reflect the national standards, the new national standards. And, you know, I think everybody is well-intentioned. People looked at tests, you know, in many states, and they said, oh, this is all rote learning, we don't want this. Let's come up with a better assessment that gets at thinking skills, right? So that's what this is supposed to be. So this year is a field test year for PARC. So in each state, it was supposed to be 10% of your kids were going to be tested in the field test, right? But now it's 15% because they lost some big states that don't want to be in the field test. So 2/3 of all the schools in the state will be involved in the field testing. But in each school, it'll only be some of the kids, right? And 15% of the kids statewide. Okay. So this is what their tests look like. This is a slide from one of the PARC PowerPoints. There is an end-of-year assessment that's the most similar to what we do now. Sometime around May, though, they're going to do it. Then there's supposed to be a performance-based assessment, although this is not what I originally have heard of as performance-based. These are sort of long-form things. So you write an essay, for example, right, instead of short. And we'll have some examples from a math example of a performance-based assessment. That's supposed to happen in March. So instead of the one period, we're now going to have 2 periods. Then there's also supposed to be a speaking and listening assessment, but that one they don't seem to be caring all that much about. It's locally determined. It doesn't enter into your accountability score, so I think that will be under control of the local people. And then they are also going to be marketing diagnostic assessments and a mid-year assessment, which you don't have to buy if you're part of PARC, but it's supposed to help you do better, right? So that's a whole other set. Presumably it would replace rather than duplicate, right? Diagnostic tests that people are already using, I hope. So it's a whole family of exams that are being developed. So here we have, so I picked out just 3 sample items from PARC and from MCAS to try and see how are they similar or different. This one turned out to be extremely similar, as you'll see. So this, for some reason, their website is, I don't know, the way they put this up is very hard to read. So I'm just going to read it because I don't think anybody can. Is that right?
What grade is this?
This is 3rd grade. 3rd grade. Yeah. For school field trips, 72 students will be traveling in 9 vans. Each van will hold an equal number of students. The equation shows a way to determine the number of students that will be in each van, right? 72 divided by 9 equals what? Okay? That's the equation. Now, they're not asking you to answer it yet. The given equation can be rewritten using a different operation. Use the drop-down menus to select the operation and the numbers to complete the equation. Okay? So here there are drop-down menus, right? And you click on the down arrow and you have one of those, you choose one of these 3 things, 9, 72, or a question mark, right? And then you do the same thing, which operation are we using? And then the second part of the equation that's not there. Right? So here they put the 72 on the right, they've shifted it around. That's the question. Okay.
Now, which one is PARC and which one is...
This is PARC.
This is PARC, the
This
whole
is
thing?
PARC.
Okay.
Yes. Now the next question is the MCAS question, which just coincidentally, I don't think that they planned it this way, happens to be the exact same problem.
Oh, no, it's an 8 instead of a 9.
They gave you another piece of it this time, right? They left out the 9 and they included the 8, right? Right? So, but this is a little simpler in the sense, here's a division fact, right? It's divorced from context. So their thinking is, the other is a real life problem. I mean, that's, right?
Well,
that's
I think we
reasoning.
should stop and ask them, is the other more of a real life problem? So that's a really interesting point, because this is supposed to assess math, and math, how it can be applied in the real world. But you said something very interesting. We have to teach them to use the drop-down, and if they don't get that,
Forget it.
but that doesn't mean they don't know math.
That's right. But that's
So
just gonna be
this
years.
is the issue when you try to measure something, and that's why no single measurement is the best way to measure anything anyone knows, because they never get at the pure characteristic that you want. It's always contaminated by other things. And if there's more verbiage, what also are you measuring? So what do you do with the level of vocabulary?
Okay, let's do another comparison. So this is another PARC one. This is their idea of performance-based assessment in 7th grade math. Okay, so this is the March period, not the end of the year period, right? So, Anne's family trip. And there's several questions about Anne's family trip. This is part A. Anne's family is driving to her uncle's house. The family travels 383.5 miles between 10:15 a.m. and 4:45 p.m. What is the equation that Anne can use to determine their average rate of travel for the day? R, in miles per hour. And what you're supposed to do here is, instead of filling it in with a pen, you are dragging the tiles. This is using technology to make more interesting questions. All right, so here you have all these possibilities, and you've got to drag the tiles into, 3 tiles into the right place. So presumably, yeah, so one of the operations is going to go in the middle, and then you've got to figure out where the others. Okay? So that's part 1. Let's go to part 2.
I can tell I'm a bad learner because I just keep looking at the picture and
Well, you know, that's an issue. If you have someone that's highly distractible, you know, that's not gonna, you know, Pat, you're absolutely right. This is another good point, that, you know, will the person focus on
Yeah.
the part of the exam that you want them to get it right? And, you know, if people don't even look at the picture, care less, they're gonna be
That's right.
obviously advantaged.
The MCAS booklets are much more stark. So this is, right, this is the same problem, the same situation. Up there, it's exactly the same. But the problem is different. Calculate the family's average rate of travel. And then fill in the blank, so I assume with a keypad, right? To complete the following statement, the family, you can enter a whole number or a decimal. Yeah, and it's a good question as to what, you really need to know whether they are going to use a calculator or not. So the average rate of travel for that day is what? So that's part 2, okay? And part 3, is this part 3? Yes, you can't even tell that it's a new page. Anne tells her family, it's a good thing we traveled as fast as we did, because if our rate had been 50 miles an hour, we wouldn't have gotten to this house until about, what? So if their average rate was 50 miles, what time would they have gotten? So it is this national consortium. I think Pearson might be the contractor. That is, so the national consortium with a governing board that Mitchell Chester is the chair of, is in charge of developing these questions. And they're trying to do something that involves more thinking. Right? Now, it also involves more confusing and you know, how to, I don't know whether there are any, like, teachers involved in this kind of stuff. Lots of times these things are done by, you know, they're supervised by experts and they're done by relatively unskilled people, you know, but actual classroom teachers are usually not very involved in this. Sometimes they are. I don't want to put these guys down. I think that they are trying to do a good, I'm sure that they're trying to do a good thing, you know. So that's this question. Let's look at the MCAS equivalent. So also for grade 7, right? So MCAS open response is about as close as you get to these performance-based, right? So can you read this stuff at the beginning? Show your work on your answer booklet, so there's certainly a scratch paper there. So here's the question, and it also has several parts. Billy left home at 9 a.m. and rode his bicycle to the park at an average speed of 10 miles an hour. He arrived at the park at 9:30 a.m. How many miles from the park is Billy's home? Show or explain how you got your answer. So I think this is very similar, right? Now, I have to confess, I picked things to be kind of similar, right? There are many more sample questions, and I would suggest people who are interested. We have the websites where you can, did I bring it in? Yes, I did. Where you can see the more sample park questions and more released MCAS questions. But when you look at the sample park questions, remember that these are questions that they really labored over, right? When they come to, right, they have a very small number, like maybe they have 30, 40. When they come to churn them out by the 100, I don't think that they're going to be as good. Otherwise, I mean, I think these questions are comparable. If you pass, if you pass these tests, you should not need remediation when you get to college. Because lots of kids pass MCAS and do need remediation. But nobody has shown that if you pass this test, you will not need remediation. Right? Whether it's possible to make this kind of test that eliminates the need for remediation is not at all clear.
Well, I think a couple of ways philosophically they're approaching it different. Whether that was their thinking, whether they've accomplished it in actuality is a separate issue. But Alan talked about before about it's a performance assessment. And that means not just whether you know something, but can you apply to a real world problem what you know. because that's the bottom line. If you're running a graduate program, you're looking for the top PhD candidates, you don't want to know just that people memorize different equations. You want to know whether they can apply that in the context of doing research. That's your bottom line. So the question, and that's true of everything, right? Work world, whatever, whether you could apply whatever skills, knowledge you have. So that's one way that it's different, which means it also involves maybe higher order thinking skills. That was the intent to some of the problems. So that's two ways I think philosophically is different. But this whole notion, this assumption that it's possible to develop one test in different subject areas for each subject that will tell us whether someone's ready for college. What does it take to succeed in college? You're laughing. You're giggling now. This is the core assumption to this, that you can develop a test that will tell you how well someone's going to succeed in college. Is that possible? And what would that test look like if we could do it? This is like a thought experiment. Could we do that? You're laughing. I can tell you right now, many of the kids from the inner city, when they go to a more competitive university, it's not just the academic, but it's the complexity of dealing with people from other cultures, different socioeconomic strata, not having someone structure things, being on your own, and this is even for some kids from the upper income strata challenge, and you're on your own in terms of studying. The class time is far reduced. So there's all these challenges in terms of habits, personality characteristics, whatever you want to call it, that we're never going to be able to test. And perseverance. Being able to, you can have a test for perseverance. So to say that you're going to develop a test, now maybe you could have a better test for the kind of academic skills that they're going to have be tested in college, but to test whether someone's going to be successful in college, that's a horse from another color. Yeah. I doubt if anyone here in this room is against tests. That's not the issue. But when it becomes such an important measure of how the community is doing in terms of schooling, what an individual on one test has that much importance. Not only does it corrupt the test, it has a danger of corrupting the people associated with the test, involved with the test. And I think that's the bigger danger, that we're not going to be measuring what we intended to measure anymore.
So, now here, the big difference here is that they are providing the text. So it is not based on anything you read outside the room earlier in the year. Right? So it's your ability to read these two texts, one by Ovid and one by Anna Sexton, either one of which I've read, and write an essay about it, using material from the text. Okay? Now the MCAS version.
A few years ago, I interviewed a student whose first language wasn't English, and he had failed the MCAS multiple times, and went to a MCAS tutoring program, and what they told him to do was to memorize a few books so he could tackle. See, you said, Pat, that you couldn't remember. So his English still isn't very good, but he by memorizing those books, he had an idea of where to plug them in for the answers, and that was sufficient. Now, I don't think that will help him as much with the park.
So, here is a little summary of how much testing, right? MCAS is in grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10. PARC has 2 testing sessions for all those years plus 9 and 11. So there's more testing in the PARC system. other differences. The MCAS test is not timed. The PARC test is timed. So they're going to give everybody, they're going to, in the field testing, they'll see how long it takes most kids, and they'll add 50% of that. So there will be time pressure on kids. And the thing we've already talked about, which is that they're going to be computer-based. Now, the other big conglomeration of states is doing computer adaptive testing. So where if the kid gets a question wrong, the next question will be easier, right? And if the kid gets it right, the next question will be harder. They're not doing that in PARC. They are going to give everybody the same test, and they say that they will have a wide range of difficulty levels so that they'll be able to discriminate not only right in the middle. And nobody really knows how much this is going to cost. The Pioneer Institute thinks that it will cost on the order of $300 per kid to do the technology improvements and the administration and the professional development and everything. $300 over the next 7 years. So, it's spread out. But I think, this is the kind of thing that goes way over budget because nobody can really anticipate all the things that you're going to have to change in order to make this work. Okay, what's the next slide? I don't remember. Oh, okay, so this is what we learned this year on Tuesday morning. This week on Tuesday morning. We already knew that they were going to do field testing this school year. What we didn't know was because PARC said that they were going to be complete implementation next school year, right, 14-15. But instead, the district will be able to choose which one they want to use, and except for 10th graders, they still have to take the MCAS to get their high school diplomas. The following year, so that's 2 years from now, everybody's supposed to take the PARC still except for the 10th graders. It's only in 3 years that the 10th graders might have to pass the PARC, but they said, we'll give you updates this fall. So, I think these people are feeling the pushback and sort of trying to respond to it and be a little flexible and not put themselves up against the wall because they think people are, they're losing states, for example, and a lot of people are angry, including superintendents even. Teachers they probably don't care about so much, but superintendents I think they don't want to annoy. I don't remember if there's another slide or not. Yes. Oh, so this is interesting. Other states have used tests that are supposed to relate to the Common Core standards, with at least 3. I'm not sure there's more than 3. I know of Kentucky, Maryland, and New York. New York, of course, is by far the biggest. And this is what happened in New York. All of a sudden, their proficiency rate was cut in half.
Because they changed tests.
They changed tests, and the new test was supposed to relate to the new standards. Now, I have to say, I don't actually understand why this had to happen, because the explanation they give is that the standards are harder. But you don't have to you can change the standard. If you have a really hard standard, but the kid only has to get one question right out of 100, that's going to be an easy test, right? New York in particular has gone up and down on their cut scores over the last decade. They were making them easier and easier, and then they were saying, we have a wonderful situation. All of our reforms are working great because more kids are passing. And then some people, including a guy from Harvard who was involved in this, noticed that in their sort of test documentation, they were making the tests a lot easier. So then they made them way harder again, back to what they were, and all of a sudden their scores dropped, right? So they said, we have a great system because we're being realistic. And so now they've gone to this and made them harder yet, and they say, we really have a great system because now we're not kidding anybody as to how smart kids are. It's like, I don't know, but I still don't understand why they did this. It almost feels like they had to intend to do this, because if they had picked a different cut score with the same test, right, but a different number of questions that you have to get right. So PARC says, Actually, these tests will take less than 1% of your instructional time, just time on task, right, when you're actually there. And so our feeling is that's only true if you don't do anything besides that, if you don't have to prep for it, right? So our feeling is to say to the state people, to get more people to stay to the state board, if you want to experiment with new kinds of tests, that's interesting, right? But don't take it out on the hides of the kids. So don't have consequences. When MCAS first came in, there were 3 cohorts of kids, 3 years, in which kids all took the MCAS test and did not have to pass it in order to get their diplomas. Because everybody understood this is something new, we got to see how it goes, right? So let's not have the punishments. Then nobody has to spend all this time. Don't prep for it. See how it works. That's the whole idea, right? It's supposed to be how does this test work, not how does it work after you wasted a month teaching kids how to do things that are only specific to that test. So we're trying to get people to beat on the state board and tell them that.
Well, it
School
sounds like
committees,
they're hearing
superintendents.
that, though,
Huh?
because it sounds like they're hearing that. 'Cause they're
I
letting
think they're
the test
beginning to
ready
hear
for
it.
chicken out.
Nothing inevitable about this. If you think the tests, some of these tests are being overused, misused, there are things that can be done about it. In Texas, recently scaled back the number of mandated tests.
That's right.
And in large part it was because of a parent organization. And in Seattle, a high school in Seattle boycotted a test because they thought they were being asked to give too many tests, that they were being asked to give too many tests to their students. And the administration threatened disciplinary action of the school district. And the parents and the students stood by the teachers, and now it's optional. So there are things that can be done if you feel, what? Well, I gave you a couple of examples, but you know, as individuals there's not a lot, but collectively we can. And this is a state decision. This, you know, to adopt this kind of test. So you have representatives to the state government, and they need to hear from you about how you feel about this.
And
There's nothing inevitable about the way these are being used.